Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're just about to kick off the next session. I'll introduce the panel in one moment, but the topic is going to be hemp and CBD opportunities under UK and US law. So we have Robert, Peter and Anne. They will give their counsel perspective on what applies where, how it applies, what the differentiators are under those jurisdictions. We will have some topics that we will discuss, but I would also encourage you to have a think about some questions that you can fire to the panel. And as I said, we will kick off in one moment. So just to give you a little bit background, Robert is the head of cannabis law at Mackrell Turner Garrett. Peter Holsworth is Director of Cannabis Client Services for Zuber Lawler and Del Duca. And lastly, Anne Van Lainseel heads up part of the practice area for Zuber Lawler and Del Duca. Okay, so without further ado, I will kick off the discussion, and then hopefully we'll come back to you guys and we'll get you guys involved. So the first topic I'd like to talk about is cultivation, licensing and restrictions. Let's kick off with Peter, please, from a US viewpoint, and we're good to go.
Licensing and restrictions in the US, you're referring to, I would say?
Sir.
So cultivation of hemp is a bifurcated nature in the US. Because of the state-by-state regulatory systems that are set up, licensing varies from state to state in capacity, the number of licenses, as well as the size and acreage you can grow. Most of the progressive farming that's been done in the hemp space in the United States has been done leading by initial fledgling states in the cannabis industry as well. Colorado, Oregon have really emerged as large-scale cultivators in the hemp processes with very specialized strains. I've become aware recently of hemp farm in Oregon producing 13% CBG content containing hemp. And so I think that because of the fact we've had a huge blossom of cultivation and acreage that's going in and coming harvesting this October, you're seeing a revival of the farming community in the United States, and they're starting to specialize within their hemp strains that they're putting in the ground, and it's all up from here. So,
Robert, from a UK perspective.
Hello everyone, thanks for coming. From a UK perspective, we are really far behind you guys. We were just discussing that. The restrictions on hemp cultivation in the UK, I would suggest make it uneconomical. It's not a good situation. You can only extract from the seeds, the stems and the stalks of the plant, all the good stuff, the bud, the flower, the leaves you have to throw away. And the conditions on the licenses are very restrictive. The other issue is these licenses are granted on a one-year rolling basis. So if you are trying to attract investment to a cultivation business in the UK, that's not attractive to investors because they don't know if you're going to have the license 1 year to the next. And in fact, we had a big news story recently in the UK. There's a lovely company, I think they're here, called Hempen, who had their license pulled from them by the Home Office without any warning, and they had to destroy, I think it was something like 200,000 plants. And that feeds into another problem with cultivation in the UK, which is that dealing with the Home Office is a nightmare. So if you're actually trying to apply for a hemp license, you go round and round and round, and they ask you the same questions over and over again, phrased slightly differently each time. You start to wonder whether they know what's going on over there at all. So for a good company like Hempen, who's had a license for 3-4 years, to suddenly have it pulled from them without any proper engagement is really sad. It's really bad for the industry as a whole.
Can I just add one more thing about that? This is a critical moment for the UK, largely in part because if you guys don't get your act together and the Home Office doesn't initiate these licenses, your opportunity to cultivate hemp will be gone within the next 4 years. Largely because this is a commodity, and just like any other, when those economies of scale come to play, producing it in countries like Colombia or Mexico just outweighs the economic viability for you to produce it here. We're aware of just one licensee in the country of Mexico who has 20 existing kilometers of greenhouse that will flip. Now, when Mexico starts to produce at 20 existing kilometers, that'll produce enough hemp for your entire country's demand well over a 5-year period of time. So thinking that you're going to be producing it here within 5 years or 5 years post, it's just not economically viable. So yeah, you guys got to get moving.
I'm not a hemp grower, so I don't think we really have the best climate for growing hemp here anyway. So even if we did, whether it would be the best place to be growing in, I'm not sure anyway. But yeah, you're right. We're several years behind, and the current system sucks.
Right. Okay. Just on the licensing point with the Home Office, what does that process look like in terms of time? And you've talked about back and forth, but realistically, do you have a number?
You can spend several weeks just trying to get a login from them. And I'm not even joking, I'm not actually exaggerating. Just to get a login and a password from the Home Office to get onto the licensing site takes between 6 to 8 weeks, I would say, answering the questions over and over again. Once you've got the login, you then log into the main site. You have to go through your DBS check. You then have the whole same rigmarole over again, the same questions again. But this is because they know that people who want to cultivate, they are doing it to get hemp oil. And to get the best quality hemp oil, you need to use the whole plant. And you're not allowed to use the whole plant in the UK. So they're just trying to trip you up and see if you're going to slip and tell them what you're really doing.
Okay, thank you. Anne, is there anything you'd like to add on this topic?
Sure. I think that in the U.S., what I find very fascinating, in addition to what Peter said, is that a lot of states are doing pilot programs. And as far as the places where it's best grown in the U.S., Hawaii is one of our key markets. Hawaii is being very smart about it. The decline of the sugarcane industry has left a lot of land and employees ripe and ready to replace that with hemp. And that's exactly what's happening there. And that's a 365-day-a-year growing season.
I'm going to suggest a site visit to Hawaii for the firm so we can go and investigate the cultivation of cannabis over there, I think.
Well, that's good. I own a coffee and chocolate farm on the Big Island. Come on over.
See, that's business development right there.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Slightly different topic. EU novel food regs or FDA regulations. Anne, would you like to kick off from an FDA point of view about novel food? Novelty food regulations
FDA.
From an FDA perspective.
All right. Well, the FDA is our new best friend because they continue to clarify the situation with CBD in the United States. There was message sent out in July that this month they would announce either their intentions of emergency rules or a set of emergency regulations to further clarify. The FDA is in a position that we see in the next year. They will be clearing off the shelves of anyone that doesn't have an FDA certification. So we're encouraging anyone that wants to stay in the edible. Quite frankly, the CBD is in the full court of the FDA. There's almost nothing that you would want to produce that's CBD infused that wouldn't be under the jurisdiction of the FDA. The FDA has protocols in place to do certification of CBD products. Our firm has obtained a couple of those for CBD products. And so we're very excited about the progress that they're making with CBD products in the United States.
Okay, thank you. Robert?
And it only takes a few moments to get a log on.
I wish I could say our regulators were as supportive of the industry as it seems the FDA has decided to be. We have this novel food regulation issue, which has been a cloud over the industry since January. I don't want to tell people how to suck eggs, but basically a novel food under these EU regulations is something which there's no evidence of human consumption prior to 1997. So the industry position is that CBD in its isolated form, the isolated molecule, is novel because you can't prove that people were consuming it prior to 1997. Hemp and hemp oil has been in the human diet for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. So the industry position is that a hemp oil with a naturally occurring level of CBD therein should not be novel. However, you can speak to 20 people and get 20 different ideas on what the right interpretation is. So what's really interesting for the UK now is you've got two clear positions forming hemp wars is coming, I think, because you've got the Centre for Medicinal Cannabis, the CMC, who are going down the route of saying it is novel and we're going to apply for marketing authorization from the EU for all of our members. You've then got the Cannabis Trades Association on the other side, the CTA, who are going down a different route, and they are saying it's not novel. We are going to apply for an Article 4 clarification on this, and we're going to submit our evidence to show that it's not novel. Who's going to win? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
I think it was interesting coming back to Lorenza's session yesterday, and I think she's going to trigger that Article 4 piece in the next couple of weeks, she said.
Yeah, so IA's position on novel foods,
yep.
I agree with wholeheartedly. So if you missed Lorenza's presentation, catch it on the YouTube channel because it's really good. And I think that's the right approach. The CTA and IA are hopefully going to team up and do it the right way together. But again, what the outcome is, I don't know. Both approaches are fraught with risk, and you may end up in a situation that you didn't want to be. But I suppose at least you'd have clarity. That's what the industry needs. You need clarity so that people can actually continue with their business. Because we get approached by big names, big drinks companies, big food manufacturers. They want to enter the market. They book a meeting, and then 2 days later someone tells them about novel foods, and they say, this is too risky for us. We're going to wait and see what happens.
Peter, anything to add on those points before we move along?
The FDA is giving clear guidance on how it's going to be uniquely handling CBD. Usually, when you come to market, either the FDA is going to classify you in 3 different categories, either a drug, a supplement, or a food additive. Obviously, a drug application is $1 billion process, an NDA, and that's what you come up with, an Epidiolex, right? But moreover, the opportunity, in my opinion, in the United States is really by asserting your formulation's efficacy claims through supplement value. So for a new dietary ingredient, you can now, by obtaining this ingredient, you can say, this actually puts me to sleep, or this actually removes inflammation from my joints. Without these clarifications, you'll never find your product on a big box retailer. 10 out of 10 times, Walmart, Target, Walgreens, they'll say no because they won't take the reputational risk on their $1 billion brand. Furthermore, if you're going to add CBD or a CBD product to a food additive, you're looking at a generally recognized as safe designation, a GRAS designation. And this will allow you to say this is healthy for human consumption. And so those are 2 critical designations if you are thinking about FDA applications that would allow your product to see wide distribution.
Okay.
And just to let you know, those run about $150,000 each, and they take a year.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the recurring themes that have appeared, not only on this stage, but also the main stage over the last couple of days, is retailers, brand owners' challenges around payments, proceeds of crime. So I think what I'd like to do is segue into this topic around banking and money laundering. I think, Anne, we can kick off with you, please. I think you're laughing.
Evidently. Well, Peter and I both started in Washington State, and money was the biggest issue, the biggest obstacle for most people in the cannabis and CBD industry. Ironically, one of the first institutions I worked with in the country that was able to bank openly with cannabis institutions and then push them into Oregon and down into California, they won't handle CBD right now. Because at least with cannabis THC products, the process from federal regulators is very clear, the compliance standards for financial institutions, and they're only state institutions. The issue with CBD is that banks are dealing with a federal situation, and although it has been federally legal in the United States since December of 2018, not everyone has realized that. Even the large federal banks are not clear on it. I had a meeting Thursday, literally on my way to the airport, with a large financial institution that said, well, CBD is legal now. I can just go bank with people that are doing CBD. And it's like, well, it's not that straightforward because the complexities and nuances of being able to tell the difference between cannabis derived from hemp and cannabis derived from cannabis with THC. It's a difficult thing for old school financial institutions. The hesitation, of course, is the commingling with their non-cannabis clientele and the risk of to their clients and to co-banking arrangements. Banks have a lot of collaboration, and the first institution that comes forward, which hopefully I'm a few weeks away from on a federal level with a federal bank, getting them to openly admit that they're banking CBD. Merchant services is another real struggle for online servicing of CBD accounts.
You know, I'll add a couple other things. Recently we had, I was in Washington, D.C. lobbying the federal government, and the House passed, I think it was 237 votes, the Safe Banking Act. Unfortunately, it didn't go through to the Senate, but this is great progress, because what it shows is that with institutions of standardized institutions of track and trace, which I feel as if the most quintessentially important aspect to the advancement of the industry is being able to identify the source material and its life cycle through to end product. While doing that, you can then trace that this is a closed loop system. There's no illegal or illicit inventory entry. There's no money laundering activity taking place. This provides regulators the ability to say, okay, now we understand this is not a federally legal Schedule I drug that we're transacting here. And I do believe that the Safe Banking Act over the next legislative session probably will pass. And so many of the banking, let's call it Band-Aids that have been inserted in the United States, buying this product with cryptocurrency, then flipping it over to cash. These things are short-lived. And so I'd recommend that if anybody is considering and doing an alternative banking solution, don't bother. It is within the next 18 months, and this is just my humble opinion, but within the next 18 months, we'll be banking the hemp industry in the United States.
Robert, from a UK lens?
Well, just following on from that, we actually went to the US in December to do a bit of investigations there, and the big shock I had is we went to a dispensary in Las Vegas, and you had to pay cash. And, you know, we are 6, 7, 8 years behind you guys, and I couldn't believe it. And so we were told that one of the most lucrative businesses in Nevada is secure cash storage, because these guys have piles of cash and they don't know what to do with it. Interestingly, we went to Denver, and they have been a bit more creative. And in Denver, in the dispensary, we could pay with our card, but you weren't buying CBD products or THC products, you were buying a gift card. So you pay $105, the card costs you $5, and now you have a gift card loaded with $100 that you can now spend on their products. And it comes up on your bank statement as gift card purchase. So this federal prohibition on banking is what's causing the problem for the industry over here. Because the big banks, these are global banks, HSBC, you know, all of these guys, they don't want to piss off the US federal regulators. So they have no appetite for the sector in the UK at the moment. You can go and get a bank account with Barclays or NatWest or RBS or whoever. When they find out what you're doing, they will shut your bank account down, they will take away your payment processing services, and that's no way to run a business. However, there are some smaller providers who are now having a real appetite for the sector. They have a higher risk profile. They provide business bank accounts and payment processing services to the crypto industry. And there's now some providers who are willing to do it for the CBD industry. But from a business perspective, you need stable banking services to be able to grow your business. So yeah, it's a real problem. The sooner you guys could sort out this federal prohibition for us, the better, I think, as far as I'm concerned.
We're on it.
Typical Americans. Anyway.
Well, where America goes, we will follow, you know? That seems to be the case.
Okay. We're going to cover another couple of topics, and I'm going to open up to the floor. The next one for me is around import and export, cross-sovereign borders, challenges. Peter, can we kick off with you on that point?
Sure. You know, the United States is coming down with a record crop this year. We are booming. And so this crop will most likely be refined in all different types of various cannabinoid isolates or distillates or oils that will be shipped around the world. Largely, the complications that come with that is the percentage of THC within it. Obviously, in different countries, especially the EU, there's different various regulatory frameworks. Mostly, it's below 1%, but in the United States, below 0.3% THC count. most of the products that you'll find coming out of the United States will adhere to that because they don't want to be violating any federal law. And I would say the most sensitive or explosion that we're seeing in the quantity is T-free, THC-free. This is going to be shipped all around the world. So as long as it's below that minimum threshold of 0.3, I think you're in the clear, or even lower at 0.2. And, you know, there's different areas that are easier to get in the world from the United States. There's different complications that are posed to the UK versus Switzerland versus you know, Africa, if you will. But we're moving it everywhere. So it's like the Wild West out in the US.
I have a question. Is there such a thing as a THC-free product from a legal perspective? Or are we talking non-detectable levels? Is it the same or is it different?
Well,
in my opinion, from a legal perspective, it's different.
I understand.
Non-detectable does not mean THC-free, does it?
And there you go back to the lack of standardization and testing. So that's kind of a feedback loop that has to be addressed.
Even at 0.0000001% THC, that's not THC-free. But
right, but
you know, that's
yes.
We could do a whole other presentation on arguing about decimal points and where the zero stop. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted.
No one will come and watch that.
You may do.
I wanted to add to the import-export issue, because it's an area that I'm dealing with quite frequently these days, is that even though, as I said, and this is a little bit of a redundancy for my first answer, that yes, it is legal, it doesn't mean that every border control guy and every port understands that. And again, I'm not plugging my law firm, I'm plugging, you need a law firm, because when this gets stopped at the border, the fastest way to resolve it is educating the people at that port, at that location. I had a wonderful conversation at a global supply chain seminar that I went to for 2 days with the head of the West Coast operations for the FTC in the United States, and they do all of the import-export regulatory control, and he runs the West Coast. It was fascinating that he said, yes, we're all over the board when it comes to what documentation in which office and who's reviewing it, and that will dictate whether it's coming in or whether it's going out. And I said, when is that going to be standardized? And he said, well, really probably never. People that import and export almost everything hit those roadblocks at times.
Agreed.
So from the UK perspective, we buy in a lot of product from the US, the distillates, the isolates. There's two ways of doing it. You can use a company, there's a great company called Mile High Labs. They cultivate and extract in the US, and then I think they have an office in Belfast. So they actually deal with getting it into the UK and into the EU, and then you can buy direct from them, which is great, because then you don't have to worry about these shipments getting held up. I suspect you pay a premium on the price. I don't know what their prices are. A lot of the smaller and medium-sized CBD companies will want to buy direct from producers in the US. They're the ones that will be sweating on whether their shipment's actually going to get in or not. And from a legal perspective, it's better to get a lawyer on board before your shipment leaves its starting point, so that we can try and help you ensure that it's a compliant product and that the border agency aren't going to interfere. Come and speak to us then rather than after it's been seized, because trust me, it's going to take 8, 10, 12 weeks to try and get the border agency to release it. So I'm a lawyer, I would say that. The sooner you instruct us, the better. Well, that's a really good point. It's cheaper for me to give you the best practice importation advice than it is for me to engage with the border agency after and try and get them to release it.
Okay, last topic from me and then we'll hand over. A lot has been said in the media in the last few days around vaping, vaping issues. I'm sorry, Anne. I'm going to stand over here in case you throw something at me, okay? Okay. Peter, I'm going to start, not with you, but with Robert, please.
So what's the deal? You guys are like banned vaping in the whole of the US? Is this the situation? I don't understand.
Let's
Can't start with me. We haven't... What? Okay, all right. So vape regulations for CBD is really interesting in the UK because it kind of falls into this gap between the Tobacco Products Directive, the nicotine regulations, and the food supplements regime. So if you have a CBD vape liquid, it's not really covered by the tobacco-related products regulations because they specifically apply to nicotine products. But also it's not covered by the food regulations because inhalation is not ingestion. So how do you regulate these CBD products in the UK? You basically treat the product compliance the same as the food regulations, so you have the same THC limits, that sort of thing. And the rest is a bit of a free-for-all, to be honest, because the good thing for the vaping companies, novel food regulations don't apply. So you can put isolate into your vape products and everyone can smoke them as much as they want until you guys come along and tell us that it's now bad for our health. I don't understand.
Well, the FDA has admitted where they don't have knowledge, right? In the July statement by the FDA, they recognized one of the main topics of their report was that we don't have enough data on this to say yes, no, or sideways. What we have recognized is that there has been an explosion in health-related illnesses surrounded vape juice, terpene absorption through vaping, and the amount of popcorn lung that has popped up in the United States is increasing thousands of percent year over year. So I think there's a grave concern right now for how these alternative products are affecting our lungs. And I think that's right, to be quite frank. I think it's smart for us to take a step back before we legalize and say everything's ready to go. You know, there's a lot of these companies putting PG and other things in to make these products vapable. Well, you know, that's not good for our health. So, you know, for me, I prefer the flower. I prefer smoking flower. I know what I'm smoking. I know the test results. I know there's no pesticides in it. When in the United States, we have a tremendous problem both on the CBD and the THC side with counterfeit product. We grow a lot of cannabis in Northern California. A lot of that cannabis comes from ground that's been using pesticides, herbicides, all sorts of stuff that you don't want in your body for many, many years. Those are residually infected in that soil count. And those plants reflect it. So in California, for example, we require testing. We require you to show that your plant doesn't contain heavy metals, fungicides, doesn't contain all these pesticides, and you're not putting those in your body. I think that needs to be a standardized test across the board for all of these vape products that we're putting in our lungs because, you know, we have a lot of kids, a lot of young children, 18, 19, 20 years old, that are thinking this is the next wave, that by the time they're 30 are going to have popcorn lung. And, you know, in my opinion, I think it's the right thing to do.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open to the floor. Can I just borrow one of those? Okay, anyone have any questions for the panel?
Hi. I'd like to try and cut to the chase, if I may, please. And Robert, this is for you. With respect, the US is 50 different jurisdictions, all of which are at least 3,000 miles away. I'm very familiar with the Home Office licensing process. Over the last 10 years, when I say we, I mean clear cannabis law reform, have attempted to JR, judicially review Home Office licensing decisions at least 3 times. We've failed every time, and I mean the fundamental reason we've failed is the cost of bringing such an action. We now have a queue of extremely wealthy, well-funded organisations desperate to get into the UK and seize the enormous market potential there is here. When is Tilray or Aurora or any of the other Marracan, whoever they are, when are they actually going to put the money in and judicially review what are clearly irrational decisions? I know there's a lot of money involved, but the prize is huge. And particularly with the background of the new medical regulations, it's quite clear, that if the government now recognises that cannabis has medicinal value and they're denying people access to it, then for people to be able to produce it themselves or for small organisations to be able to produce it for those people, this is a rational solution to a real problem. So what we need is one of these companies to have the balls to actually put their money where their mouth is and force the Home Office to act.
Well, look, this is something we have in common with our American friends, is litigation is expensive. taking these types of matters to the High Court and getting a judge to comment on it costs a lot of money. So you're right, you need someone with deep pockets to put themselves forward to do it. Why haven't they yet? I would suggest they're probably quite happy operating in the limited restrictions now because they have the resources to get ahead of the game. In terms of smaller to mid-sized companies, nobody wants to be a test case because it's expensive, it's time-consuming, you probably can't trade whilst it's happening. I completely agree with you. Why isn't a company like Holland & Barrett that is stocking CBD products nationwide and probably making a lot of money off of it, why aren't they taking up the mantle and doing the Novel Food Challenge? It could be Holland & Barrett think they're too big for the regulators to actually interfere with, so they're making money as things stand, so there's no interest for them to actually put their hand in their pocket and take up these challenges. I don't act for Aurora or Tilray, so I can't tell you why they're not currently doing it. But you're right, someone with deep pockets needs to come and stand up for the whole industry.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
The other thing is that barriers to entry, regulatory hurdles like this create barriers to entry, which create opportunity. So because some people can't figure it out or that creates opportunity for those that can. And if I were to have a legal or a sophisticated legal team enough to be able to satisfy these and obtain these licenses, why would I want to open it up for everybody else? These are moments where competition is rare, which gives you wide open access to the market. And I think that's a large part about why these companies aren't jumping out to help everybody else.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No? One from me. Please, Peter.
Don't everybody jump up at once.
Okay. From a media... Okay.
What's the situation with CBD products for pets in the US?
Leave it on stage.
It's fascinating you ask that because I have a client that does veterinary and pet products. It's not, this is going to shock a lot of you, but in the United States, pets are property, and so they're not regarded as needing protection. The FDA does control CBD that goes into pet products, but they don't really care that much. So it's a really wide open market. It's surprising there aren't more vendors supplying the need because it does have great effect. And as people have now changed their pets into children in a lot of ways, there's a lot of money being spent on these products. I don't know what else you want me to say about that.
Well, I understand there's a huge demand for these products.
Yes.
People love giving this CBD to their pets.
Oh, yes.
And we are approached by a number of US companies that want to sell their products here in the UK, but they can't because in the UK, CBD for pets is considered a medicine. The Veterinary Medicines Directorate say it can only be prescribed by a vet.
Yeah.
So we have this interesting situation where they say you cannot market CBD products directly for use in pets.
Huh.
And as a lawyer, that's that word directly that you immediately focus on.
Go
so
around.
There are a number of companies here in the UK that are selling them,
Yeah.
marketing them through indirect methods, which I'm not going to go into and I don't endorse or condone or support. But it seems a bit odd that you can sell these products to humans, but you can't give them to your dog.
Yep.
There you go. I mentioned that for my friend Carl, who has a dog and loves his dog.
Okay.
Can I ask a question of the audience? How many of you actually manufacture CBD products? Show of hands. Retailers? Growers? And ancillary companies that are supporting the CBD industry? People that are curious and want to invest? Okay. And there were some people that didn't raise their hands that confused me a little. I think I covered everything.
Just my friends.
There you go. Robert's fan club. Is that the rest of you? Robert's fan club. Hey!
I'll pay you later.
Good enough. Good enough. Well, it's fascinating. This is sort of like coming to a time, coming back in time. The time machine effect of being here reminds me of our first few days and our first conferences in Washington State. There's a fascinating dichotomy of highly sophisticated, evolved brands that are understanding that this disassociation with the old school mentality of cannabis gives you a market edge and a market advantage in how you're presenting your business and who is going to adapt to not being embarrassed to buy your products. And then there's the very offensive one with the bare naked butts of girls running up the side of a screen over there. We eventually have to. It's
CBD?
the center aisle running perpendicular for those that want to go check it out. But it is fascinating to see, and what we're finding in the United States is that kind of marketing, that low-level marketing to the old school of let's get as stoned as we possibly can as quickly, is going away. That there's no place for that in this industry. I love that I go to cannabis events now and I rock up in my Audi and my Donna Karan dress and my designer whatever, and I go to the valet and they say, "Oh, are you here for the cannabis event?" And it's like, yeah, I am. And it's nice that you recognize that we're growing, we're maturing. It's not the smelly, stinky, weed-smelling, cash-based business that it was 5 years ago in the United States. I hope that the UK has the vision and foresight to take advantage of this moment in time, this window of opportunity. And to go to your question, sir, on why aren't companies lobbying, advocacy and lobbying right now has to be to a government institution that's receptive to that kind of education and straight talk. When Robert mentioned earlier, the time to bring in your attorney on import and export is before you do that. The time to bring in an attorney on your business is before you get into trouble or litigation. And understanding that if we're going to be legitimate business people in this industry, we have to understand what the expectations are.
The one thing I'll add as a summary here is that this industry is going to commoditize very, very quickly. So the economies of scale of production within the next 2 to 4 years are going to completely flip. In areas like the United States, it's the same reason we don't produce sugarcane, right, or fresh cut flowers. So although we're booming right now, most likely this is not going to be economically viable to actually cultivate large-scale hemp farms in the United States even, when Mexico and Colombia and Peru and these other multi-cycle seasons or countries turn on. But with that being said, you guys have a great opportunity to focus on the consumer. If you're building a brand now, what dictates a great brand? The ability to provide a consistent consumer experience. If I were to open up a can of Coca-Cola and drink it in Los Angeles versus New York versus London versus Hong Kong, despite perhaps linguistic changes, I'm going to have the similar consumer experience. Now, that's a challenge in the cannabis market here in the United States, or at least I can speak to, because you can go to the same dispensary, buy the same branded product month to month, and have a completely different consumer experience. So what I'm trying to say is that the market is still wide open for brands to be able to identify their consumer, identify that demographic, attack it with consistency. And how do you do that is you control the input-output of what you're receiving from your raw material to your formulation process. So if you are going to invest large-scale amount of money and serious dollars into building a CBD brand, understand where you're sourcing your material from. Understand the standard operating procedures by which that cultivator is putting in, even down to the water that they're utilizing to cultivate their cannabis and grow their cannabis or hemp. This will allow you to formulate that consistent consumer experience which the consumer can depend upon every single time they take your product. That's why you pay more for that little turquoise box at Tiffany's, right?
So, I'm actually Ignite's lawyer in the UK. So, unsurprisingly, I take a different position to Anne for a few reasons. One, I'm probably their target demographic. And two, this is true. I post a lot on LinkedIn about the cannabis and the CBD industry. A regular good post will get maybe 1,000, 2,000 views. I had a picture of me with 2 of the Ignite girls at the Ignite launch party, and I put that on LinkedIn. How many views do you think I got? 30,000 views. So take from that what you will. That marketing, there is room in this sector for that. It works, okay? Who has better brand recognition than Ignite? I love working for Ignite. I love it. But Anne's concerns are valid because you run the risk of alienating a huge portion of your potential market.
So you take CBD for relaxation, right? Does anybody take CBD before they go out and party at night? Nobody. So I would just say, CBD is not necessarily something that you're taking with alcohol or getting jazzed up or going to the swimming pool and putting on your thong, right? And I would just say, eventually the mindset is going to come full circle. We're going to realize that this is a medicinal property. This isn't something that I'm going to party with, right? And so I would just put that out there. Maybe Dan's such a cool dude that if I take CBD, I'm going to be just as cool as Dan.
Well, do you guys know the brand Green Monkey? Yeah. Have you tried a gin and Green Monkey? Go and try it.
Advocacy. Any questions? We can still go. We've got a couple of minutes, or we can. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, you've got 3 highly qualified people on the stage here. Make the most of the questions. May I, please?
Just to follow up on your comment about Ignite, I was wondering, why do you think their marketing and their positioning and their success in that instance came about when CBD is kind of seen as a more relaxing type quality? Are they just repositioning themselves in a different space, or do you think that's because of lack of consumer awareness? Or
I tell you what kind of company do you think Ignite is? What is Ignite?
It's CBD vapor.
It's not a medicinal cannabis company. It's not a CBD company. Ignite is a recreational cannabis company. That is what they are known for in the US and Canada. They have recreational products that they sell. So they sell weed, don't they? And now they have CBD products. Why have they only introduced their CBD products here? Because recreational cannabis isn't legal yet. Where are they positioning themselves for the European market? Are they positioning themselves at the medicinal cannabis end of things? Or are they positioning themselves at the recreational cannabis end of things? So, there's no point criticizing Ignite, saying you're selling medicines, but you're saying it's a fun lifestyle choice. This is a recreational cannabis company, and when recreational cannabis becomes legal in the UK and Europe, they're going to be ready for it.
I have some questions, lessons from America, basically. I'm helping to start Save UK CBD campaign to allow British growers to harvest the flowers to produce CBD in the UK. Our current legislative and regulatory framework doesn't allow that. And as part of that campaign, we're putting simple legislative changes. One is to allow the harvesting of the whole plant under an industrial hemp license, cultivation license. The other is the regulation to be moved from the Home Office Drugs and Firearms Unit to DEFRA. And the third is to set an evidence-based minimum THC level in the product. Now, those are 3 simple things, but my understanding is that from more developed markets like the US and Canada, the devil is in the detail. My fear is that we have a successful campaign, whether it's through legal routes, through judicial reviews from particular cases, as my own company will have with Hempen going through, or whether it's through wider campaigning, which is what the campaign's more broadly about, and research and direct lobbying. But my fear is that they put the devil in the detail and they stop out the small and medium scale producers and growers from actually operating in that space by putting in barriers to entry, regulatory and legislative barriers to entry that mean that only huge megacorps can actually afford to surpass that. Novel foods being one that's already happened in the EU, we can see that. The novel foods catalogue, where it costs $300,000 per product to get a license. Are there lessons from the US, United States that we can learn from here in the UK if we're looking to become a global leader as well?
Thank you.
I'll draw the parallel in THC market. Compare and contrast the two first recreational states, Colorado and Washington. In Washington state, the legislation was all written to specifically address your issue. There were limitations. You had to be a resident of Washington state to get licensed. There was no outside of Washington state investment in Washington licenses allowed. There were, what other limitations that were favorable? You couldn't be vertically integrated. You could be a grower and a manufacturer, or you could be a retailer. You couldn't be all three. And you couldn't have, what was the other thing I just thought of? You couldn't...
11 fingers?
Oh, you could only have 3 licenses in retail and only 1 in producer-processor. So there were these forced regulatory limitations, and the regulation that you're working on can strategically impose some level of forcing part of the industry, if not all of the industry, to be mom and pop shops, to be small businesses. Consolidation will happen. People will figure out how to consolidate within the regulatory schema. But, I helped write the Affordable Care Act in the United States. And writing regulation is very, very difficult. And so keep that in mind.
Another lesson I'll draw from the United States, in comparison to, we have a bifurcated licensing structure from state to state to state. In Washington, for example, when they went live, they gave it a lottery system. So if you put your name in the hat and you were a hairdresser, all of a sudden you're running a cannabis retail license the next day. And that proved to be unsuccessful. We had a lot of unprofessional people that didn't know how to run businesses, and they failed tremendously. If you look at the Washington retail market, 25 names of the 450 plus retailers control 35% of the retail business. And that's a natural thing that's going to happen in any commoditized industry. We're going to have consolidation on a massive scale. But in comparison to, say, Florida's licensing, where there's 17 or 22 licenses, those are mega corporations, big billionaires. There's a Russian oligarch that owns a license in Florida. By design, it's corrupt. Opposed to look at California's licensing, where you're going to have tens of thousands of licensees. This is what I would encourage the UK to do. If there's any regulators that are listening to us, don't hold up, or when you're licensing, don't do 10, 15, 20, even 100. Give everybody a chance to, if they're appropriately qualified, to apply for licensing. Because obviously commoditization will take place. Obviously consolidation will take place. But in that process, you'll give the country the opportunity to create tens of thousands of millionaires. And then in that process, you'll have a downstream revenue. All those revenues will create ancillary businesses, and they'll create service businesses, and you'll create an economy that develops for the benefit of your country, opposed to like Florida, which a lot of that money just leaves the state. They will never have good point. They'll never have that massive wealth creation. The other aspect of it in the United States, I don't know if they have that so much here. In the United States, we had a criminal justice program that was specifically designed to hold minorities down. Plain and simple. That's the truth. And one of the most important aspects of our licensing process is to recognize that, to include minorities in the licensing program to justify social equity and to give them a chance to participate in the industry. So I'd incorporate that as well.
30 seconds. We're done.
Go for it, Ed. You got it.
Okay.
It's just Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles offered a social equity program, and we hosted 22 licensees and helped educate them on how to get those licenses. And I really admire the fact that they weren't just social economic distress. People that had been convicted of cannabis crimes that are no longer illegal were able to apply for licenses.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Anne, Peter, Robert, thank you so much.